Sirens don't care about your resume. When the red and blue lights flash, you're just a target in the crosshairs of someone else's prejudice. For one highly decorated federal judge, a quiet evening stroll turned into a brutal lesson in profiling, proving that true power whispers while ignorance screams. The crisp October wind swept through the affluent, tree-lined streets of McLean, Virginia. It was the kind of neighborhood where manicured lawns stretched out like emerald carpets, and the driveways were paved with imported cobblestone. Here, in the quiet shadows of sprawling estates just a few miles from the epicenter of American political power in Washington, D.C., resided the Honorable William Harrison. At 62 years old, William had spent the last 3 decades building a pristine, unassailable reputation in the American legal system. A graduate of Georgetown Law, a former federal prosecutor, and now a recently confirmed judge on the United States Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit, his name was quietly being floated in Senate hallways for the highest court in the land. But on this particular Tuesday evening, William wasn't a towering figure of jurisprudence. He was just a tired man in a faded gray Georgetown hoodie and comfortable sweatpants, walking his golden retriever, Barnaby. It was 9:15 p.m. The streets were deserted. William let Barnaby sniff a patch of oak leaves near a wrought-iron street lamp, inhaling the cool autumn air. It had been a grueling week of reviewing appellate briefs, and this 30-minute walk was his only solace. 2 blocks away, Officer Bradley Kincaid was cruising in his patrol car, his fingers drumming a restless rhythm on the steering wheel. Kincaid, a 12-year veteran of the county police force, was a man simmering with a perpetual sense of unappreciated authority. He had recently been passed over for a promotion to detective, a slight he blamed on the department's new political correctness rather than his own mediocre clearance rates and mounting pile of civilian complaints. Lately, McLean had seen a string of high-end burglaries. Expensive watches, electronics, and jewelry had vanished from 3 different homes in the past month. Captain Miller had ridden the patrol division hard about it during the morning briefing. Kincaid was desperate for a win. He needed a collar that would prove his instincts were sharper than the brass gave him credit for. As Kincaid turned the cruiser onto Elmwood Drive, his headlights washed over a figure standing under the street lamp. Kincaid slowed the vehicle. His eyes narrowed. He saw a black man in a baggy gray hoodie and sweatpants, loitering near the driveway of the expansive Kensington estate. The golden retriever on the leash didn't register in Kincaid's mind as a family pet. It registered as a prop, or perhaps an afterthought. What Kincaid saw was a stereotype that perfectly aligned with his inherent, unchecked biases. A guy like that doesn't live in a $5 million zip code, Kincaid thought, a cynical sneer forming on his lips. He's casing the neighborhood. Kincaid killed his headlights and let the cruiser roll silently toward the curb, stopping about 20 feet away. He threw the vehicle into park and hit the high-intensity side alley light, blinding William in a sudden, harsh halo of white. William squinted, raising a hand to shield his eyes from the blinding glare. Barnaby whined softly, leaning against his owner's leg. "Hey, you there! Stand still!" A voice barked from the darkness behind the spotlight. William lowered his hand slightly, his heart giving a dull, heavy thump. 30 years in the justice system, and he knew instantly what this was. He had read the case files, he had issued the rulings, he had seen the statistics, but experiencing the sudden, visceral shift from peaceful citizen to immediate suspect was a chilling reality. Kincaid stepped out of the cruiser, the heavy thud of his boots echoing on the asphalt. He rested his right hand conspicuously on the butt of his sidearm, a classic intimidation tactic. "Evening, officer," William said, his voice calm, resonant, and entirely devoid of panic. "Is there a problem?" "I'll be the one asking the questions," Kincaid snapped, closing the distance. As he got closer, Kincaid's gaze swept over William's casual attire. He didn't see the exhaustion of a federal judge. He saw a threat. "What are you doing out here tonight?" "I'm walking my dog," William replied evenly, gesturing down to Barnaby, who was furiously wagging his tail. "Whose dog is it?" Kincaid asked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "And whose house are you standing in front of?" "The dog is mine. His name is Barnaby, and I'm standing in front of the Kensington residence. Richard and Martha Kensington," William answered, maintaining eye contact. He knew his neighbors well. Richard was a prominent corporate attorney. Kincaid scoffed. The fact that the man knew the homeowners' names only made Kincaid more suspicious. Probably did his homework before casing the joint, the officer thought. "Let me see some ID," Kincaid demanded, stepping into William's personal space. "I don't have my wallet on me, officer. I live just 2 blocks that way," William said, pointing down the street toward his own sprawling brick colonial. "I just stepped out for a quick walk before turning in." "You don't have ID," Kincaid repeated, his voice rising in manufactured triumph. "You're walking around a high-income neighborhood at night, wearing a hoodie, looking into people's driveways, and you have no identification. Do you think I'm stupid?" "I think you are jumping to conclusions, officer," William said, his tone shifting imperceptibly from neighborly to authoritative. It was the same tone he used from the bench when a lawyer was stepping dangerously out of line. "Under Terry versus Ohio, you need reasonable, articulable suspicion that I have committed or am about to commit a crime to detain me. Walking a golden retriever in my own neighborhood does not meet that standard." Kincaid's face flushed red in the glow of the streetlight. The mention of case law felt like a direct insult to his authority. Who was this guy? Some armchair lawyer? "Listen to me, pal," Kincaid hissed, pointing a gloved finger at William's chest. "We've had burglaries in this area. You fit the profile. And now you're getting smart with a police officer. That's a good way to end up face down on the pavement." "I am not getting smart, officer. I am stating my constitutional rights. I have not committed a crime, nor am I suspected of one. If I am not under arrest, I am going to continue walking my dog home." William turned his body slightly, preparing to walk away. "You aren't going anywhere," Kincaid barked. Before William could take a single step, Kincaid lunged. He grabbed William roughly by the shoulder of the Georgetown hoodie, spinning the 62-year-old man around with unnecessary force. Barnaby let out a sharp bark, startled by the sudden violence, and began to jump up. "Control the damn dog, or I'll put it down," Kincaid yelled, his hand unsnapping his holster. For the first time that evening, a flash of genuine anger pierced William's stoic demeanor. "Do not threaten my dog," William said, his voice dropping an octave, carrying a weight that made even Kincaid hesitate for a fraction of a second. William immediately shortened the leash, pulling Barnaby close and commanding him to sit. The dog, well trained, dropped to his haunches though he continued to whine. "Hands on the hood of the car, now," Kincaid ordered, pulling his handcuffs from his belt. William took a slow, deliberate breath. As a judge, he had dedicated his life to the rule of law. He knew that arguing on the side of a dark street with an adrenaline-fueled, biased officer was the most dangerous thing a black man could do. Regardless of his status or education, the street was not a courtroom. The street had no gavel, only guns. He would fight this but he would fight it in the arena he commanded. Without another word, William walked over to the police cruiser and placed his hands flat on the cold metal of the hood. Kincaid smirked, feeling the rush of absolute control. He kicked William's feet apart roughly, patting him down with aggressive, intrusive hands. He found nothing but a plastic bag for dog waste and a house key. "Nothing on you, huh? Smart. Leave the burglary tools in the bushes. Pick 'em up later," Kincaid muttered, finding a way to twist even a lack of evidence into proof of guilt. He grabbed William's wrists, pulling them behind his back, and clamped the steel cuffs down hard. The metal bit sharply into William's skin. "Officer," William said quietly, his cheek pressed against the cruiser. "These cuffs are excessively tight. I have a history of neuropathy in my left hand." "Tell it to the medic at the station," Kincaid replied, utterly devoid of empathy. He shoved William towards the back door of the cruiser. At that moment, a porch light flicked on across the street. Mrs. Higgins, an elderly widow who had lived in the neighborhood for 40 years, peered through her curtains. William saw her. He could have shouted to her. He could have screamed, "Martha, tell this officer who I am." But a profound sense of principle rooted him in silence. If he used his privilege and connections to escape this, he would merely be an exception to the rule. He needed to see exactly how this officer treated a citizen who didn't have a voice. He needed to witness the system he presided over from the very bottom. "What about my dog?" William asked as Kincaid forced his head down to push him into the back seat. "Animal control will pick him up," Kincaid said dismissively. "No," William said, his voice hard. "Tie his leash to the Kensington's fence. They are awake. Their lights are on. They will bring him inside." Kincaid rolled his eyes, but perhaps realizing the paperwork involved in calling animal control for a golden retriever was a headache he didn't want, he obliged. He tied Barnaby to the wrought iron fence, ignoring the dog's distressed whimpers, and then slammed the cruiser door shut on William. The back of the police car smelled of stale sweat and cheap pine air freshener. The hard plastic seat offered no comfort as the handcuffs dug deeper into William's wrists. Kincaid got into the driver's seat, grinning as he keyed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4. I have a 1015. Male suspect. Fits the description of our neighborhood prowler. Transporting to the 12th precinct." "Copy that, Unit 4," the dispatcher's voice crackled back. As they drove out of the pristine neighborhood and toward the bustling commercial district, Kincaid couldn't resist gloating. He looked at William through the rearview mirror. "You guys never learn, do you?" Kincaid sneered. "You think you can just wander into nice areas, take what people have worked hard for, and slip away in the dark. Not on my watch." William sat in the shadows, his face illuminated intermittently by passing streetlights. He was quietly cataloguing every civil rights violation Kincaid was committing. Unlawful detention, false arrest, Fourth Amendment violations, potential assault. "What is your name and badge number, officer?" William asked evenly. "Officer Bradley Kincaid, badge number 8472, Kincaid said proudly. "Go ahead and memorize it. You can spell it right on the complaint form they'll throw in the trash." "I assure you, Officer Kincaid," William murmured, a quiet, dangerous calm settling over him. "I will not forget it." 20 minutes later, they arrived at the 12th precinct. The station was a stark contrast to the quiet wealth of McLean. It was loud, chaotic, and bathed in flickering, fluorescent light. Telephones rang incessantly. A man in the corner was shouting obscenities while being processed. Kincaid hauled William out of the back of the cruiser, grabbing him by the bicep and marching him through the double glass doors. "Got a live one for you, Paulson," Kincaid called out to the desk sergeant, a heavy-set man looking exhausted behind a mountain of paperwork. Sergeant Paulson looked up, his eyes drifting over William. Unlike Kincaid, Paulson had been around a long time. He possessed an instinct for people. He noticed the posture of the man in cuffs. Most suspects brought in off the street were frantic, angry, or terrified. This man stood perfectly straight, his chin level, his eyes taking in the room with an analytical, almost authoritative sweep. He didn't look like a burglar. He looked like he was inspecting the precinct. "What's the charge, Brad?" Paulson asked, sighing. "Prowling, loitering. Suspect in the Elmwood burglaries," Kincaid rattled off, pushing William toward the booking desk. "Caught him casing the Kensington place. Refused to provide ID, getting mouthy." "I see," Paulson said, typing slowly into his keyboard. He looked at William. "Name, sir?" Before William could answer, Kincaid interrupted. "He's playing games. Wouldn't give me his name on the street." "I was not asked for my name on the street," William corrected smoothly. "I was asked for physical identification, which I did not have on my person. Had Officer Kincaid asked for my name, I would have provided it." Kincaid scoffed. "All right then, John Doe. Let's hear it. Who are you?" William looked directly at Sergeant Paulson, ignoring Kincaid entirely. "My name is William Harrison." Paulson paused, his fingers hovering over the keys. The name sounded familiar. In the Washington, D.C. metro area, certain names floated in the ether attached to news segments, high-profile rulings, and political discourse. "Date of birth?" Paulson asked. "September 14th, 1963. Address? 412 Elmwood Drive, McLean, Virginia." Kincaid let out a loud, mocking laugh. "Yeah, right. 412 Elmwood is a $6 million estate, buddy. You expect us to believe you live there?" William turned his head slowly to look at Kincaid. The expression on this older man's face was not one of anger, but of profound, terrifying pity. It was the look of a grand master watching a novice eagerly move his queen into a fatal trap. "I don't expect you to believe anything, Officer Kincaid," William said softly. "But I do expect you to allow the sergeant to do a background check. You'll find my fingerprints are already in the federal database." Paulson's brow furrowed. He hit enter on his keyboard, running the name and date of birth through the National Crime Information Center, NCIC, and the state database. The machine hummed for a second. Suddenly, the screen blinked. A red banner appeared across the top of Paulson's monitor, indicating a high-level government clearance file. Paulson leaned in closer, his eyes widening. He read the file. Then he read it again. The color rapidly drained from his face, leaving him looking as though he had just witnessed a ghost walk through the precinct doors. Paulson slowly looked up from the screen, his gaze shifting from the computer to William, and finally to Kincaid, who was leaning smugly against the booking counter. "Brad," Paulson said, his voice cracking slightly. "Take the cuffs off him." "Excuse me," Kincaid snapped, his smug grin faltering, replaced by a defensive scowl. "Are you out of your mind, Paulson? I just dragged this guy in for prowling. He's a flight risk. He's uncooperative, and "Brad," Sergeant Paulson interrupted, his voice dropping to a gravelly, dangerous whisper that cut through the ambient noise of the precinct. "I said, take the damn handcuffs off him, right now, or I swear to God I will strip you of your badge myself before this shift is over." The entire front desk area seemed to go quiet. The shouting man in the corner stopped yelling, sensing the sudden, catastrophic shift in the room's atmospheric pressure. Kincaid blinked, genuinely bewildered. He looked from Paulson's terrified face to William's eerily calm one. Grumbling under his breath about bureaucratic nonsense, Kincaid unclipped his keys, grabbed William roughly by the arm, and unlocked the steel cuffs. William immediately brought his arms forward, wincing slightly as blood rushed back into his severely compressed wrists. Deep, angry red indentations circled his skin. He didn't rub them. He simply stood tall, adjusting the sleeves of his Georgetown hoodie, and locked his eyes onto Sergeant Paulson. "Thank you, Sergeant," William said, his voice ringing with quiet authority. "Now I believe you were about to inform Officer Kincaid of exactly who he just assaulted and unlawfully detained." Kincaid leaned over the desk, squinting at the monitor. He read the federal clearance banner. He read the name. He read the occupation. William Harrison, United States Circuit Judge, U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fourth Circuit. Kincaid felt a cold, leaden weight drop into his stomach. The blood drained from his face so fast, he felt momentarily dizzy. "No," Kincaid stammered, shaking his head. "No, that's impossible. It's a glitch, or a stolen identity. Judges don't walk around Elmwood Drive in sweatpants at 9 o'clock at night." "Judges live on Elmwood Drive, officer," William corrected, his gaze turning to Kincaid with devastating precision. "And they are perfectly entitled to walk their dogs on public sidewalks without being subjected to baseless profiling, physical assault, and constitutional violations by officers sworn to protect them." Before Kincaid could formulate another pathetic defense, the heavy wooden door to the back offices swung open. Captain Miller stepped out, a steaming mug of coffee in his hand. He was a grizzled, no-nonsense veteran who spent half his time managing crime stats and the other half managing the delicate political egos of the affluent county. "Paulson, what is all this shouting about?" Captain Miller barked, stepping up to the booking counter. He took a sip of his coffee and glanced at the man standing in front of the desk. Miller stopped dead. He lowered his mug. He had attended a county law enforcement gala just 3 weeks prior. He had sat 2 tables away from the man currently standing in his lobby, wearing a faded hoodie and angry red handcuff marks. "Judge Harrison?" Captain Miller said, his voice a mixture of shock and sheer horror. "What in the world are you doing here? Good God, what happened to your wrists?" "Captain Miller," William greeted him with a sharp, polite nod. "It seems your department has instituted a new policy regarding evening strolls in McLean. I was violently detained, searched without probable cause, and brought here by Officer Kincaid, who informed me that I fit the profile of a burglar." Miller whipped his head around to stare at Kincaid. The look in the captain's eyes was lethal. "You arrested a sitting federal appellate judge," Miller roared, the volume of his voice making several nearby officers jump. "You dragged a judge out of his own neighborhood." "Captain, he was loitering. He didn't have ID." Kincaid stammered, his previous arrogance entirely evaporated, replaced by the pathetic whimper of a bully who had just picked a fight with a heavyweight champion. "He was standing in front of Richard Kensington's house," Miller exploded. "The man lives 2 doors down." "Are you completely incompetent, Kincaid? Do you have any idea the magnitude of what you've just done?" "The magnitude, Captain Miller, goes far beyond my title," William interrupted, his voice effortlessly commanding the room. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. The sheer gravity of his words anchored everyone in place. William stepped closer to the counter. "My title is merely the reason you are paying attention right now. But let me be perfectly clear. The tragedy here is not that Officer Kincaid arrested a judge. The tragedy is that Officer Kincaid arrested a citizen solely based on the color of his skin and the neighborhood he was standing in." William slowly turned to look at Kincaid, who was now visibly trembling, his career flashing before his eyes. "You told me on the street that you guys never learn," William said, quoting Kincaid's vile remark. "You assumed I was a criminal because my existence in that zip code did not compute with your prejudice. You violated the Fourth Amendment. You ignored the standard of Terry versus Ohio. You used excessive force. If this is how you treat a man who knows the law inside and out, I shudder to think what you do to a young, terrified kid working a night shift who doesn't have the vocabulary or the power to defend himself." "Judge Harrison, please," Captain Miller said, his tone desperate, trying to do damage control. "I apologize profusely. This is a massive failure on our part. We will handle this internally. I assure you Kincaid will face severe disciplinary action. Let me have a cruiser drive you home. We can put this behind us." "We will not put this behind us, Captain," William replied firmly. "And this will not be handled merely internally to protect your precinct's public image. Law enforcement requires public trust, and men like Officer Kincaid are a cancer to that trust." William reached into the front pocket of his hoodie with his right hand. Everyone tensed slightly, but he only pulled out a small notepad and a pen he always carried. He jotted something down, tore off the sheet, and slid it across the counter to Captain Miller. "Tomorrow morning my clerks will be filing a formal civil rights complaint with the Department of Justice," William stated. "I am officially requesting an independent federal audit of this precinct's arrest records, specifically focusing on Officer Kincaid's history of detentions and probable cause affidavits over the last 5 years. I suspect we will find a deeply disturbing pattern." Kincaid let out a choked gasp. A DOJ audit didn't just mean losing his job. It meant potential federal charges. It meant prison. "Judge, please, my pension, my family," Kincaid pleaded, taking a step toward William. William held up a hand, stopping the officer in his tracks. "You did not consider my family when you threatened to shoot my dog. You did not consider my humanity when you laughed at my pain. The law is not a weapon for you to wield against those you deem unworthy, Officer Kincaid. It is a shield for the vulnerable. You have fundamentally forgotten that. And now you will face the very justice system you have so recklessly abused." William turned back to Captain Miller. "I do not want a ride in one of your cruisers. I will walk back to Elmwood Drive. You will send an officer, someone other than Kincaid, to the Kensington residence immediately to inform them I am unharmed, and I will be collecting my dog." "Right away, Your Honor," Captain Miller said, his shoulders sagging in absolute defeat. As William turned to leave, he paused at the double-glass doors. He looked back at Kincaid one last time. "You told me to memorize your badge number so I could spell it right on the complaint form," William said softly, the words echoing in the silent precinct. "Badge 8472. I assure you, officer, I have a flawless memory." William pushed through the doors and walked out into the cool October night. Behind him, chaos erupted in the precinct. Captain Miller immediately demanded Kincaid's badge and sidearm, placing him on unpaid administrative leave pending a massive internal and federal investigation. The arrogant officer, who had started the night looking for a power trip, was left completely stripped of his authority, weeping in the break room as his career disintegrated. 40 minutes later, William Harrison arrived back at the Kensington estate. Richard Kensington was standing on his porch in a bathrobe, looking deeply concerned, holding Barnaby's leash. When the golden retriever saw William, he barked joyously, pulling away from Richard to run to his owner. William dropped to one knee on the manicured lawn, wincing slightly as his sore wrists took his weight, and buried his face in Barnaby's soft golden fur. He breathed in the cool night air. The street was quiet again. The beautiful houses stood like silent sentinels in the dark. He had survived the night not because he was a judge, but because he remained calm in the face of tyranny. But as he looked down the empty, affluent street, William knew his fight wasn't over. It was just moving from the pavement back to the courtroom, where he would ensure that the darkness of prejudice would always be met with the blinding, impartial light of justice. Power unchecked is justice denied. Judge William Harrison's ordeal reminds us that a badge must be a shield for the vulnerable, never a weapon for the prejudiced. It takes immense courage to stand tall and maintain composure when a broken system tries to force you down to the pavement. If you were inspired by Judge Harrison's unwavering dignity and his brilliant fight for true accountability, hit that like button, share this video to spread the message, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories.